Welcome to our Tuesday live stream today with John Willis and Morgan Gold. Who's this Morgan Gold cat? I got to tell you guys a story about how he ended up on here today, because a few weeks ago, it was like ChatGPT unleashed the Valkyrie on everybody's YouTube channels, and all of my live comments that week were all about it. And he was like, no, you need to check it out, Nicole. And finally, John's like, okay, dude, send an email. And I gave my email, and Morgan sent me an email. And I have to admit, I'm super skeptical of the quality of the product we get from AI, because my past experiences with AI have been pretty crummy. But I'm like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And I played with it for 3 weeks. I went back and forth with Morgan, but in the process, I realized I actually had seen some of his videos from his YouTube channel in the past, because he's got this whole homesteading side to him that's pretty cool. And I was like, well, great, we can talk about that. And then I have to say, ChatGPT is much more functional than I thought it would be going in. So I went in very skeptical, played with it. We're going to talk about some of that today. Morgan's going to share with us how he's using it. But before we get into that, because Morgan hasn't been like intimately connected with all our networks for the last 5 years, coming to all our events, Morgan, tell us who you are and how you ended up going from being a marketing guy to living out in the middle of nowhere, being you just told us you're the largest goose farm in Vermont. That's pretty darn cool. Tell us how you got there.
It's like being the tallest midget, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, my name's Morgan Gold. I run Gold Shaw Farm here in Peacham, Vermont. We are a duck, goose, chicken, cow, and tree farm. I've been doing it for this is like getting into my fifth year now, fifth go around kind of the season of farming. Really was working a job in Washington, D.C., kind of hating my life. My wife and I, we found this farm. We decided to buy it and then like treat it as like, oh, maybe we'll retire there one day. But after a year of like going back and forth, we're like, screw it. We don't have kids. We don't have debt. We don't have anything. Why don't we try to figure out a way to live up there? And so we've been doing that. And I also run like a lot of social media accounts for our farm and promote it, which is probably how we're best known. So we have about 4.5 million followers between YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. And so we like to try to tell stories about what's happening here on the farm.
Awesome. And I think you're responsible for taking Jack's concept of all ducks go to bed and making it super popular.
I 100% popularized all ducks go to bed and 100% stole all ducks go to bed. So yes, it was one of those things where like back in the day when I was in Washington, D.C., of like dreaming of maybe having animals one day, I used to watch the Duck Chronicles. That was like one of the videos, along with like, say, Justin Rhodes and others, that I would like watch and be like, gosh, I want to be doing that someday. And so when I got my first batch of ducks, it was one of the things I trained them to do. They were the first animals I had on the farm. And so I started training them to do it. And now they actually do it automatically most nights, but I can just yell it and they'll go do the thing.
Yeah.
And it actually works on geese too. I don't think enough people know that.
I raised chickens with my ducks once and they learned it too, except for they're less consistent, but they will do it. It's the middle of the day one where they're like, no, lady, it's not dark enough. That's the one where I get pushed back. The
chickens run on their own clock. The ducks and geese, so right now, the way we keep all of our birds for the winter, right, is we have about 100-foot by 20-foot hoop house that we built. It's covered in greenhouse plastic, but it's completely unheated. It stays about 20 degrees warmer inside there than outside. And I have ducks, geese, and chickens all living together there, and they will, basically at sundown go in there automatically. But if I want to get them in earlier for some reason or another, like I have to go somewhere, I can just do the whole all ducks go to bed and they'll go right in.
Yep. John doesn't do that with his at all, right?
If I need them I just shake, scratch, and they bullets. They just come barreling towards that, and we can put them where we need. I saw Curtis Stone's running row houses up in Canada for his chickens this year. And we've got some farmers' friends row houses, and we're definitely going to put poultry in those this next winter up at the top paddock for sure.
This is the second year I've done it where I've used basically greenhouses as housing for poultry. And I don't really want to keep birds any other way for the winter at this point. Cool. So the birds are at our place. They free range 24/7 in the summer months, but in the winter months they have that. And actually my plan this coming spring is when I evict everybody to like go back out to full-time free ranging, I'm going to be experimenting with actually growing pumpkins inside the greenhouse as a way to, again, just cut my feed costs and just really sort of limit the amount of inputs that are coming into the farm.
Do you have a lot of squash vine and squash beetle moths and stuff up there?
Not a ton. Like, I mean, you know, pumpkins especially, but, you know, other squashes as well, but pumpkins especially just thrive really well. It's going to be really good fertile soil because it's been just getting covered in duck, goose, and chicken crap for 5 months. But yeah, we don't have significant squash beetle problems. And so that keeps it a little easier to grow those types of things here. I think it's too cold is my theory, that they don't have a good, it's not that they don't exist. They just don't get infestations like folks down south seem to get around here.
I think we could unskin it and then run, you know, shade cloth, a low percentage shade cloth, and that would keep most of that out of there, I think.
Probably. I mean, yeah, that's the other way to do it, is just, seal it off to make it harder for pests to get inside.
Yeah, people I know who have had success keeping squash vine borers out have done it with landscape fabric that they keep sealed. And then the water permeates from the rain because it's fabric, and that's super helpful. Or they just make the squash tent, like a grow tent for pot, only you put your squash in it. And it costs about as much as growing pot to grow your squash that way, from what I understand, because you have to put lights in there.
That's some pricey zucchini, you know?
Yeah, a friend of mine's like, this is the most expensive summer squash I've ever grown, and now I'm just going to buy it at the store.
Whereas if you leave your windows down at the grocery store, people will just put zucchini in your car in the summer.
Yes. So I hear. I mean, it's funny because I'm the person, I go to the farmer's market and I say, you know, that one zucchini you forgot about that gets really big that you feed your pigs? Don't. I'll buy it for cheap, and then I make zoodles out of it and I freeze dry them. And so now all the farmers, they just give them to me when they're too big. And I'm like, sweet.
See, we always have the worst luck. So when we get those massive baseball bats, they usually go to the birds. But like, yeah, I find that they don't make as good a zoodle as like a good kind of standard size zucchini.
That's true. But by the time you freeze dry them anyway.
Fair point.
Yeah. And the other thing is zucchini. So because I'm a ketogenic eater, right? Zucchini flour will thicken stews at a lower glycemic impact. So you can also make it into zucchini flour. Those are weird things Nicole Sauce does on her homestead. I eat weird food. It is what it is. It actually really confused I'm visiting. Obviously, guys, I'm not in my studio. I'm visiting family right now. And they're like, what do you eat? And I said, meat. And they had no idea what to do with that. I said, I'll show you when I get there. And then I just cooked meat. And they were like, oh, that's really easy. Yeah. Super easy. Throw a little broccoli on the side. We're good to go. Okay. So how long have you been homesteading?
I mean, like sort of this sort of scale and approach in here, it's been since 2018, but you know, I had like little baby steps along the way. So when I used to live in Brooklyn, we had this apartment where we had rooftop access. And so I started actually growing tomatoes on the rooftop in Brooklyn. And that was like my first, like, kind of like dipping my toe in of, ooh, wow, growing your own food is actually kind of a fun, cool thing to do. Then actually, when we moved to Washington, D.C., we had a row house right in southeast part of Capitol Hill. And when we got there, I ripped up our entire front yard and put in raised beds and started growing produce like right there in Washington, D.C. And like all my neighbors looking at me like I'm insane, like what's going on with this guy? And it was awesome because we were like, you know, for probably about 9 months out of the year, we were getting a lot of our produce right from the front yard. And that was kind of the next step. And it was really that, as well as like, you know, kind of reading folks like Mark Shepard and seeing what was happening at larger scale, particularly with silvopasture and tree crops, that got me into this idea of, oh, you know what? I want to do it, like, go big here. Let's get a farm. Let's do like the whole 9 yards. And sort of that's what like kind of further took me down that funnel. And yeah, so 2018, I moved up here. And yeah, here we are. Yeah, like I said, 5th, I guess, or 6th season of farming that we're about to undertake.
So are you farmer or more rancher? More meat, or are you doing a lot of actual veggies and stuff?
So this is one of those, like, I guess, really controversial ones, right? Like where everybody has their own definition. I consider myself a farmer because I focus most of our production on creating stuff that I can then sell to other people. And so that to me is like the major distinction between just say a homesteader and a farmer. But if you look at the scale that I'm doing at, it's, not massive. We harvested 1 steer last year. We harvested about 45 geese, 30 ducks. We sold I forget how many, a couple thousand trees. So we do sell a lot of those in quantity. And then we sell a lot of eggs, particularly fertilized eggs through the males. It's like one of our biggest markets for both ducks and geese. And so because of all those activities, that to me says I'm a farmer. I don't think you really have ranchers on the East Coast. We don't have those large tracts of land that folks out in Montana or Idaho have access to, where it's actually ranging ranch land, versus here, we're just like a little hill farm. Like our property here is 160 acres. It's about 10 acres of what I call kind of the bird yard and permaculture orchard, sort of like that whole area is one spot. Then we have about another 40 acres or so of pasture up on the top of the hill that we're fencing in and starting to graze more with the cattle. And then the rest of it's all forest. And so we could expand and get more cattle and convert some of that forest into silvopasture for more grazing. But at the end of the day, it's like 40 or 50 acres. And so that doesn't feel like a ranch. That's a hill farm. And the big thing that I believe, and this is probably my driving belief for how we design this farm and where we're going, is I like to treat the farm as an ecosystem and really think about the principles of, well, I've got this anchor species with the cattle. I've got helper animals like ducks and geese and chickens. I have, things like barn cats and livestock guardian dogs helping deter pests and predators, and trying to balance those things out while also recognizing that I want great habitat for black bear and white-tailed deer, and even coyotes have a place in the ecosystem here. And so I'm trying to balance this land in a way where kind of all these things are working together to produce income and food, but then also a good habitat for as many animals and creatures as I possibly can, as well as plants.
Are you able to produce any of the food that you're feeding to the animals other than the grass for the cows and stuff? Or are you having to bring inputs in?
Yeah, John, I'm going to mute you in between answers because we're getting a little echo from you.
So mostly it's bringing inputs in. And it's actually where, when I think about long-term, where do I want the farm to go? I think a lot about phasing out certain animals, particularly the duck, where they eat some insects, but they really need their grain or else they're not going to survive or thrive. Chickens are similar, but chickens have such an important role for helping our cattle that I'm more reluctant to part ways with them. The geese, I believe, are actually the most sustainable form of poultry, because once they hit about 6 weeks, they're getting 90% of their diet from grass. And so even though they're not ruminants like a cow, they're basically acting like one. And so I see such a benefit of having geese following cattle 2 weeks later. And so I think I'll be forever doing that. But right now, we still are dependent on a couple of feed mills that are local here for feeding all of our birds, even though our cattle are 100% grass fed.
Will the geese help with the fly load from the manure, or just the chickens?
I've experimented with this. I haven't even found the ducks to do all that great a job. They do better than the geese, but look, geese like grass and weeds. They're not big insect eaters. I mean, they might occasionally catch a bug in their mouth, but that's not what they do. They eat grass and weeds. Ducks are always kind of rooting around looking for stuff, but they don't like to go into cow pies. It's the chickens that are the superstars when it comes to, trying to reduce our fly loads and that sort of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, I find here on the feed part, it's a different equation for feed for ducks, where once summer ramps up in Tennessee, there are so many bugs that I hardly have to feed my ducks again until late fall. So it's kind of interesting how the climate changes that math.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there is this thing too, where it's I can cut my feed bill in July pretty low, but pretty much, from October to May, I have to be able to expect snow, and I have to expect freezing temps, and I have to be able to say, it's not going to provide much for the animals. And so it's a different, I mean, look, we have probably a more aggressive growing season than you guys do because of, we have more daylight and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a very short, intense window we have. A lot of this actually has me thinking, and I'm just going to throw this out because this is something I've been thinking a lot about, but I don't have any plan to it, if I shift my focus to actually dairy cows, which have been a traditional animal in my area and region, do I do that and pair more with like pigs and actually kind of shift my focus a little bit that way? It's one of those things that I think about for the long term, because back to your question, John, yeah, I'd love to scale back how reliant I am on other inputs where, well, I don't think we'll ever be 100% closed system. We're a more balanced ecosystem. And that's what I'm really striving for.
Got it. We've put in swales this last year, Nicole, as well. And we've had like Nick Ferguson and Billy Bond, Permapastures. They've come out and done quite a bit of work here, actually. And then we put in a lot of fodder trees. We have small animals, so the idea with the fodder trees is that we can do silage if we had to, or direct feed, because I've got rabbits and ducks and chickens and small things. And now we've got some sheep. So, that stuff will work well for that. And we can just, chop it off and just keep it slow growing, just compost it.
Yeah, no, I that's part of my plan too. So I mentioned something earlier, the permaculture orchard, which I don't know if you guys have heard that concept. This guy, Stefan Subkowiak, who's up in Quebec, he's, I think, kind of the main guy behind like talking about it, or at least he'll tell you he was. And, basically what it is interplanting of trees along essentially swales and berms. And so we have 8 rows of swales and berms going up the side of a hill. And they have these planting patterns that are a little bit different each one. So it's like, I'll have a chestnut, I'll have a black locust, then I'll have an apple. Then that pattern will repeat the entire row. So I never have 2 chestnuts together to help with pest load and other things like that. But then also just having a lot of diversity in what's there. Then like the next row will be a combination of say chestnut, white mulberry, and a butternut. And like I kind of have those as a repeating pattern. And so that's been a part of our long-term plan, but we put those trees in back in the fall of 2017. And at this point, I'm getting mulberries on the regular, and I'm getting, black locust trees that are almost 15 feet tall. I have chestnuts that are about 12, 13 feet tall. And I got like a couple of burrs that birds stole last year. And so I'm really hoping to start to get nut production too. But yeah, I think you're totally right that like, trying to use fodder, trying to do coppicing with some of that stuff, it's an important part of like, how do you think about kind of the long-term self-sufficiency and sustainability of your property?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We did nitrogen, stone fruit, nitrogen. And then understory, we've got, on the X, we've got all kinds of different stuff. There's some 600 strawberries on one of the berms, and daffodils and garlic and oregano, like everything's planted. We're just waiting for it to wake up at this point.
It's funny you talk about the swales and berms, because when I think about what we did with our permaculture orchard, that's actually my biggest regret. So, I was reading all these books and all this theory, and I was like, oh, yeah, I need to have swales and berms, and I'll do everything on contour, and that'll make the most sense. And I still kick myself every day when I'm out there looking at it, because number one, look, we're in Vermont, and yes, we have droughts, and yes, the climate's getting more volatile, and those are issues. But we are such a wet climate that like we don't have a lot of water retention needs the way other parts of the country do. And so that was one, it's maybe overkill. But then number two, it makes it so much harder to manage and care for the trees. And when I'm actually in the process of planning to do a lot more plantings next year or next fall, or this fall, I should say. And when I do, it's going to be straight lines. They're going to be 10-foot widths. So it's like basically 2 passes of the brush hog with my tractor if I needed it. Like I'm realizing that, the simple straight line, while it's maybe not absolutely optimal or perfect, to have better and easier management sometimes is an acceptable trade-off. And so, yeah, I regret how I did our swales and berms at this point.
They told us when we put them in, access. I'm like, we'll just drive over it with the 4-wheeler. No, they're 6-foot mounds, man. They are grand. The only way I can describe them.
I've got the same exact thing. They're not 6 feet, but they are about, at some of the highest points, like 2.5, 3 feet. And so to try to go over it with the 4-wheeler, it's like, hold on for your dear life there. And so, like, even as I'm going through with like a tractor, and in these days I just run the cattle through, so I don't need to mow. But 2 or 3 years ago, I'd need to mow and be like terrified on like an incline, like on the side of a hill. Yeah. And so
I actually think it's one of the big mistakes that folks who are dreaming about having a homestead or a farm and wanting to do, but they never quite do, where it's like you fall in love with the vision of the absolute perfect system that you hear from somebody, but then you become so blind to what works best in your context, as well as what's the easiest thing to manage.
Yeah, that's something that I worked really hard with Nick Ferguson and I probably had 3 permaculture consultants come out, even though I've learned all this stuff, because I think also when you're looking at your land, you're like, I have this picture in my head and there's butterflies and fairies and it's awesome. And then they're like, yeah, but how are you going to get from here to there? If you put that there, how are you going to get from here to there? And something that I did a little differently than John on mine, I put micro swales in, which will eventually flatten out because I do want to capture some water because we do have some water challenges. But my primary goal is low maintenance long term. And I wanted to be able to get to it. And I think 20 years from now, I probably won't walk as well as I do now. And I wanted to be able to be out there easily and have my mom, who is also, 20 years from now, well, she might not still be with us, but if she is, she's probably going to be a little less mobile. And so all of that was integrated. Plus, I don't eat a lot of fruit and I have animals to feed. So my food forest is more for the animals than for me at this point. And I think that taking the time to think about all of those things before you start makes a huge difference in what you end up with at the end. And I think it's when we think about permaculture, we get too sucked in by the, what are those wood things called?
Hugelkultur.
The hugelkultur or the swale or the food forest or the herb spiral. We start obsessing on the tactics before we have the big picture. And if you get the big picture, you don't kick yourself later. And believe me, I've kicked myself about so many things at my little place that I did years ago.
But you almost have to do that to see if you like it, just so that it's out of your system, And okay, so we put swales in. If I completely hated them, I could flatten them out within 2 hours with the skid steer. I mean,
yeah.
It's cool.
but here's the thing. So the way I did mine, I have on both the swale side and the berm side, I have trees, and so yes, at this point I could flatten them out if I so chose, but then I'm murdering a tree that I just spent 5 years nurturing, and there's just no way you're going to do that. And so basically what I do is I just sort of suck it up at this point. But, for stuff that I'm doing for the future, straight lines, easy to run fence line, because that's the other thing. When I run the cattle through it, probably takes me an extra, 45 minutes each time I'm doing the large grazing cell to wrap around various contours and curves versus straight lines and a subsoiler. And I'll probably do about 50% of what my giant berms are doing right now.
Yeah, John doesn't have that issue. He can run his sheep tractor right through there, I think.
We set it up for small alley cropping, so we can run our tractors, 12 feet wide. So we built everything about 17. So we can get a skid steer or we can get a mower or whatever we need through there.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's just something I think it's important for people to hear those stories. So maybe they don't do it. Because the other thing is, if you're asking yourself, it's like when you build a fence. If you're asking the question, do I need a gate there? The answer is yes, even if you don't right now, because there's probably something about that and more gates is usually better.
Yeah, well, and I think the other actually important thing is we're all going to fail. I think actually that failure part is such an important part of getting stuff going on a property. I think the thing I advocate is don't try to do stuff on a large scale in the early days. If I failed and I had just done one 500-foot long swale and berm and I'm kicking myself over that, it's not that big a deal. I did 8 and it's basically almost 2.5 miles of swale and berm that I did. And so it's I went so all in. That to me is the real, the real mistake that I feel like I had there. And so doing things on a small scale. I mean, look, our farm operations, right? Year 1, we just did ducks. Year 2, we added geese. Year 3, we just got better at doing ducks and geese. Then we add the cattle. And it's you slowly build up your farm business. And so I didn't invest a ton of money into cattle in year 1. And I could almost guarantee you I wouldn't be doing this today if I had approached it that way.
Are you the only one doing physical labor out on the property?
For the most part, yes. I have people I'll hire for certain projects. So like I have a friend who's really good with an excavator. And so either I could mess around and spend 3 days doing something, or I can hire him for the afternoon and he can do a beautiful job. And so those types of things I do. But in terms of farm chores, work, mulching, that sort of stuff, I just do that. Because what I find is the trade-off of available labor here is the most difficult thing. So I can spend the time outside here doing my thing versus I'll hire somebody virtually to help me edit a video because it's easier to find an editor in Atlanta and have that person work in Atlanta than it is for me to try to find somebody here in Peacham, Vermont to help me, mulch trees. I'm trying to find the best available labor and then figuring out how to manage my business accordingly because of it.
That makes sense. Okay. Let's start talking about AI a little bit here, because at the beginning, Morgan's like, hey, we're not going to agree on this. And I hope we don't, because it makes a much better discussion. So ChatGPT, it's going to take over everything in our lives and bring in a centralized digital currency and make us all part of the technocratic state, and we're all going to die, right?
I think it's actually going to bring a whole new era of some very useful tools that'll help small business owners scale in a way that you would have never imagined. So yeah, there you go.
Okay, well, tell us what ChatGPT is and why you're kind of excited about it.
Yeah, so ChatGPT is probably one of a handful of new artificial intelligence tools that have rolled out in the last 90 days or so that are really offering artificial intelligence in a way that's practical and usable. I think when I brought this up a couple weeks ago, and I think it was Jack who said I used that before. Those stupid chat bots are so worthless and not interesting or not worth the time. Where yes, that was the case a year ago. 100% agree. But what I think we're seeing now with machine learning and artificial intelligence is there are tools that are getting contextually more useful. And I've personally even found, as we were talking earlier, as we were leading up to go live, there are ways to use it to help simplify what you do. The example I like to throw out there is when we launched our soap line, I had to create catalog descriptions for all the soaps for the website. I had to do marketing emails, all of that. I farmed a lot of that out to ChatGPT, where I basically gave it a couple of specific prompts, that I dictated over the course of 60 seconds on my computer. ChatGPT took that, synthesized it, and wrote it in a way where it made sense. It had the right voice because I gave it some prompts to give it the right voice. And then I just took a look at it, did about, 5 minutes of wordsmithing, and then I was done, versus taking a couple of hours to having to write all those descriptions, which I don't feel like would have been the best use of my time. And so ChatGPT specifically, which is a platform from OpenAI, it's available free right now, and they are undergoing the best post sort of user testing and marketing experiment I've ever seen, with where anybody can go on ChatGPT right now as you're listening to this and play around with it and give it some prompts. And it's not perfect, but what you'll find is you're going to get these results back that are useful and kind of freak you out.
15 minutes after we got off that live, Jack said, hey, I think there's something to this. And the next day, Alutainment was all over it. Pet David was talking about it. My guys have used it a little bit. It seems cool. But a lot of times, about half the time we go to utilize it, the site's down.
Which is because that's where the free version's out there. And I don't know why my audio is echoing. I'm sorry. I can hear myself too through the headphones. I don't know. So sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yes, I think that the challenge is they're scaling and it's not completely ready for prime time. The trick I found is I use it first thing in the morning and I never have any problems.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I've played with it a bit. I actually, because I had to be able to talk logically about it here, tried to write some things with it. And some of it gave me really good results. I wrote a description for CJ's Dangerous History podcast presentation he's doing at Self-Reliance Festival with ChatGPT, and then that's what I did. It was 2 seconds, I got it back. I changed, some of the inaccuracies in it, because how would ChatGPT really know what he's going to talk about? since he's not programmed into their system because it's based on what 2018 and before, based on a pool of information they gave it. Sent it to him. He changed like 2 words and it was done. And so that went really well. If you go like off the rails or have something super specific to what you're doing, it does not have a way yet for you to teach it that, but I can see how it's going to get there.
Well, that's exactly why I'm excited about it. It's not so much that it's perfect and it's there. I feel like for the first time with artificial intelligence, or at least usable tools, I can see it. And just like that person who just commented and said, yeah, I think like low-end copywriting is now going to be entirely like, like done by robots. I think that's going to be where a lot of that stuff goes very quickly. But look, you can go into ChatGPT and give it a prompt like the following. Write me a email to a sponsor telling them that Goldshaw Farm would be a great place to advertise their chicken coop. And I will get a 3-paragraph email back that's written really clearly and makes a ton of sense. And I might want to tweak a word or two. But like that sort of writing, which was always tedious and the stuff that my ADHD brain could never quite handle, like to be able to farm that out is just magical to me.
Jordan Peterson said he had it rewrite a couple chapters of his book in the King James version with some Chinese dialect or something. It spit it out in 30 seconds. And he said he couldn't tell he didn't write it.
Well, and that's actually one of the coolest features is like you can give it a prompt and then say, write it in the style of, the King James Bible, or write it in the style of Stephen King. And you get something back that it's probably not perfect, but it's like, okay, that feels like, that could be in a Stephen King book versus the King James Bible. And so you start to see these differences. And then the other crazy thing is it can synthesize. So you can say, write it in a style that's a combination of Stephen King and, Malcolm Gladwell. And it's like, you can get these kind of weird mashups. And like, you can also say, include lots of analogies and metaphors. And then you find that it's scattered with a lot of these things. And so like learning how to use it, like the more you play with it, the more you learn some of these tricks, the more useful it actually becomes. And because it seems to have that back and forth, that's another reason why I see it as so powerful. Like one of the things I've started doing is like, can it be like a tool to help me brainstorm? Like I love sitting down with friends, usually over like Skype or Zoom or something. And we'll like, talk about videos that we're going to make or like ideas that we have. And like, we'll spitball and brainstorm. I still do that, but now I can also do it with a computer and it actually plays around really well. It's like, all right, give me, 12 video titles in the style of Mr. Beast talking about, milking a beef cow. And it's like, boom, all right, I got some ideas and maybe they're not perfect, but that triggers something for me that I can then play with and refine. And then that's a video I make in a couple weeks. Like that's not what AI used to do, say 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's totally true. And a way that some of my friends are using it who have trouble getting started writing is they want to write a blog post about making cheese or whatever. Write me an outline for a blog post about making cheese. And it gives them an outline of what to cover. And they say they're finding like the outline shortcut for them is really helpful, even if they haven't figured out how to make it capture their voice. I've had it take a paragraph of about 500 words, reduce it to 250, reduce it to 100, and then come up with a tagline from that. And it's come up with a tagline that was one word different than what I ended up using as a tagline for something, just because I was like, let's see what it does. Because I think we can't stop artificial intelligence from coming. And so if your reaction to artificial intelligence is running the world is fear because of all of the excellent science fiction novels we've read on this topic or movies we've seen, it's not that those things can't happen, because they can. Like it could, artificial intelligence could take over and completely become abusive. But that doesn't stop the march of technology moving forward. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I can stop it. I don't think Nicole Sauce is going to go down to OpenAI and say, you know what, this is bad for humanity. You guys got to stop, and they're going to stop, right? And so I try to see things like this as, okay, so how can it be useful and how can we spin it in a positive way? Because it's going to be in our life. And if if I get too tied up in the trying to push back on it thing, I make zero difference and it still moves forward. And if I can influence, like, this is a way to use it productively, and show other people, I think that's actually better than like running away with my pants on fire.
Completely. I mean, let me give you an example there too. So, I went to art school, and I remember back in the day when I was in art school, what I would find is there was this huge debate around digital photography because it was just starting at that point. And all the photographers were like, oh, if you're not using chemical processing for your photos, that's not really photography. You're just using computers and you're using Photoshop to adjust your levels and all this stuff. That's not photography. And like, it's funny because yes, that was like the discussion in the year 2000. Now that's like a big joke, and like those voices are gone. Like, that doesn't exist. When I've experimented with image generation through AI lately, one of the things I've seen is there are a lot of folks who actually get angry with me and say, hey, what you're doing is not ethical. That's stealing work from potential artists. That's stealing because it learns from other artists and other creation, and it uses that to create derivative product. But what I realize is, look, when I was in art school again, they were having us copy master paintings, and that was how we learned certain techniques. How is that conceptually that different than what AI is doing? And I think what's happening is it's a shift where the value used to be the technical skill for an artist. Like, I can do this form of cross-hatching or this form of watercolor, and I can do that. Versus now, I think the value is now shifting to who has the idea, who has the concept, and it creates actually a more accessible, democratized form of art creation when you start to play with some of these image generation tools. And so I think that folks who are going to say, hey, you're just taking work from other people, they're missing the boat versus saying, hey, how do I adapt and use this to what I'm doing to further evolve with it? Because I think you're right, Nicole. None of us are stopping this. It's just a matter of how do we participate. And yeah, you might want to find a way to ethically participate, but I think participation is either inevitable or you're going to just get bypassed because of it.
So it's never the high-end artists complaining. It's the mid-tier artists who aren't honing their craft to become a high-end artist. And rather than, hey, I'm not that good, they want to, take issue and blame it on something else. You can still be the guy who's not going to use these evil cell phones, but you will find that you're talking to nobody very soon. And whatever they're giving us for free, you can't even imagine what level they're at currently in the real world. We might mostly be controlled by AI for all we know. I mean, with the way they can generate things now, who knows? So
this is the part where we freak out the entire audience and explain to them that this entire podcast was generated using artificial intelligence. None of us were actually here. They just took our old videos and mashed them up.
We're not even here. Yeah.
But actually,
it's John, possible because with video, and we interact through media with most of our politicians, maybe they don't really exist.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the one problem, and I definitely see it as a problem that's going to be coming, where some of these tools, like there's actually tools out there where you can speak 3 sentences and then they can replicate your voice and create everything very, very realistically. There are also tools where you can actually take some video and then turn that into video of somebody else talking and doing something. So it's like something that you're seeing in video didn't really happen. We already as a society struggle with what's true and what's not. And I mean, regardless of your perspective on what side is right or wrong, I think we all can collectively agree that that is a big structural problem with our society right now. I think AI is only going to exacerbate that and create even more issues when it comes to saying what's true, what's right, what's wrong. It's going to become more and more subjective. And I think how we grapple with that, I think that's really where the ethical dilemma discussion should be coming from.
He's rendered us silent. I thought John was going to jump in there. I'm thinking about it. So I come to art from the musical standpoint, right? I have a music background, and I studied music and music history, and I studied art history, and I studied history, and all of those things are wrapped together. If you think about how art progresses as technology shifted and we started moving faster in trains, for example, art became less specifically drawn. Like you had more of the impressionistic sorts of drawings, right? Well, music sort of followed that same trajectory. And if you look at one famous composer and compare them to a composer 50, 80, 100 years earlier, you'll see that they pulled veins forward from those composers if they came across them, and they pull veins in from current events, and they pull veins in from the visual or like story acting art. So to think that AI, which is basically doing the same thing, is to say that anything we do is original at this point, I think is a little bit absurd. I've always, the only way you go original is original for the sake of original, and then that ends up pithy. If you think about how that works, and even in the music business side, when I was in the rock and roll world, in order to get signed by a label, they would run your music through a computer to analyze if it was closely enough related to other popular songs with the way the music structure was. And if it wasn't, they wanted you to change what you wrote so that it would be more consumable on the popular music side. It was part of why I never pushed really hard after a certain point. I was a regional person, and I was okay with that because I was like, I'm just going to write my songs and do my songs, and I'm not going to write them by computer. But that was all relating back to what people are familiar with. That was my random addition.
I think that's right. Yes, I mean, it's that principle, Isaac Newton. Yeah, the shoulders of giants. I mean, it's that premise, whether you're thinking about science, art, anything, where we are influenced and building on what's come before us. I think that same thing happens now, and it's just, I think it's unsettling when it's not a human and it's, essentially a computer. I think that's the shift. That's the difference here.
I think most people taking issue with it, they're not busy creating, right? They're not creators, most of them. You don't have a guy creating something or a woman creating something who is taking issue with somebody kind of doing the same thing because they're currently busy creating, right? They're constantly climbing and honing their craft. Typically, the people having the conversation are not involved in the conversation for the most part, right? They're just on the outskirt. They're more fans, right? They are being angry for somebody else when they themselves are not involved in it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Okay, so Morgan, we asked John asked you this question before we started. How are you using AI in your world specifically to make things better for yourself?
Sure. I mean, the couple examples I give, like the soap one, helping me with web copy and making sure I'm not having to like write lots of stuff and getting me going on something like that. I think that's a good example. Writing emails and email responses. I am a notoriously horrible emailer. And actually, I've found that at least with this, I can like say a sentence of here's what I want to say, get something back and get back to people quicker. And so those are like probably the most basic examples. And then I think the third one is, like I said earlier, using it as like a researching tool or brainstorming tool. And, I can and I just shot a video this morning talking about cattle and climate change. And I summarized a bunch of articles and YouTube videos and got bullets back from ChatGPT from those articles and videos. Then I could take that and use that to structure my video and what I wanted to say for my outline for that video. And it just saved me a significant amount of time versus my traditional approach for those like research heavy videos where I was like, doing note cards and like, trying to label stuff out. And it just makes such a difference. And so that's where I'm using it right now. What I wonder is like what other potential uses. I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of what it could do.
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Ask it what it can do.
Oh, you'd be surprised what happens even coming back for that. I mean, it's actually very cool just in terms of self-awareness that it has around kind of the benefits and abilities.
Yeah, the one thing I wish it could do is say, refer to specific websites, like pull the information and put this together. I tried that like 6 different ways. I tried pasting the content in, and I was doing this to try to see if I could get it to work to write a description for my spring workshop. Joel Salatin is not speaking at my workshop, but it really thought he was, and it would not let him go.
So here's actually one thing I've found with ChatGPT specifically is you can give it feedback and it will rewrite for you. So for example, you could say, please revise the previous description. Joel Salatin is not speaking at this workshop. And like oftentimes you'll get back exactly what you're looking for, or a version that has like him stripped out and says, okay, now it's, Nicole Sauce doing this, blah, blah, blah.
It told me it couldn't write the summary because it didn't know enough.
Yeah. Well,
that's what I got when I told it to take Joel Salatin out. I'm like, I would love to have him speak there. If anybody wants to sponsor him for $10,000, he will speak at my spring workshop if he's available.
Well, but that's where, so what I have found is this, like the other really useful way of doing it. So you take the article, copy it, and then you paste, you basically write the prompt, and then like directly underneath your prompt, you paste it. And so it's like, summarize the following article into 12 bullet points explaining what this workshop's going to be about. And it'll just, kind of spit it out for you that way. I found that that's the best case. What's going to happen, and I mean, this is like where like the Microsoft news is probably the big news, right? Once it gets integrated with something like Bing, that's when it gets really crazy. ChatGPT, like the access it has to the internet right now is like a sandbox where it's walled off. It has nothing after 2021. It's like it's got parameters. It's got things that it's saying, hey, we can or can't talk about it. It's saying this is a good source versus a bad source. It's a very, very internet light that it has access to right now. When that, if or when that gets less fettered, I think that's going to be really a next evolutionary step.
Yeah, I think when you can tell it, look at this resource, and it can actually go out on the internet and look at that resource, which it cannot do right now, that'll make a huge difference. I saw that article. So Microsoft invested a whole bunch in it, and that means they're going to use it in something.
Yeah, I mean, the big rumor is that they're going to use it as the interface for Bing. And so, while, Bing's always been a joke of a search engine, right? Like, now I have this option. Do I use Google or do I use Bing? Well, Bing has, kind of the ChatGPT API already built into it. Well, maybe that is going to be better and more efficient to use that. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. There's actually a website that somebody just started that uses the ChatGPT API. And it basically will give you 4 sentences on anything. And so it essentially says like, okay, give me 4 sentences on what happened with World War I, or give me 4 sentences on the best way to raise cattle in an intensive grazing system. Like, and it'll like go around and go to internet sources that this company has connected to. And it does it really well. I think it's like Perplexity or something like that. Is what it's called. It's pretty cool just in its own right. And so it starts to show you the potential of where it could go in the next 6 to 12 months.
So John, you're hearing all this. What do you think?
I think it's cool. I don't know. I mean, it'll tell you World War I from whose perspective, right? World War II from whose perspective. So it's going to be programmed. Can it evolve on its own? It has the parameters up of the sandbox. What happens when it does figure out that it can get on the World Wide Web? What happens then?
And I think those are the real questions to be grappling with. I think that those are exactly right, John.
There's plenty of post-apocalypse, prepper fiction out there exactly about that thing right there.
We should do like a watch party of something related to this sometime in the next month. I think it'd be hilarious. Well, except I haven't figured out how to do a watch party without it being awkward.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part about those. It's like, we're all watching something together. We can't talk all at the same time.
It can't be worse than Mystery Science Theater.
Well, we could do like Prepper Homesteader Mystery Science Theater watch party, and with a couple of personalities, that would probably be pretty funny. But it would take 2 hours.
Yeah, you gotta get
2 hours. You're not mucking out the pig cage or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, and nobody's gonna want to watch for 2 hours either. That's the problem.
I think this thing does things that, like you said, we don't really know what its capabilities or even how to utilize it, right? Because my first question was, why do I want this? I don't write blogs. And my second question was, okay, if this thing will write blogs, how do I make money writing blogs? What is it? Is it just advertising, or I have click through and monetize somehow? But then they're like, well, it'll speak as though it's Tupac, or it'll give you an address as though Donald Trump is presenting it. Was one of the ones I saw. And then when I saw Valuetainment talking about it, I thought, well, maybe there is something to this, right? Maybe I should, because if you're always going to know it's me because it's misspelled, or there's an extra B. If you ever get a text message or a line of text from me and you can't read it, just remove all the B's, because when I hit the space bar, some reason there's always a B in there. I don't ever correct it. I'm like, well, they know it's me, they'll figure it out kind of shit.
Yeah.
So if ever you get a grammatically correct sentence structure and paragraphs, you're going to know that that was probably ChatGPT at that point.
John is being held hostage right now, and somebody has accessed his Facebook account and sent me a message because there are no B's instead of spaces.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I actually got one of those today that was a little hard to figure out, but I got it.
So I think actually, though, that John, the mindset shift I'd push you on is it's less about, hey, how do I use this to write blogs, or how do I do this? What I have found most useful is to look at my daily tasks and say, what do I hate doing? What sucks? What wastes my time? And like, can I apply that to this? And so like, that's where like I said, the email writing example is probably the best one, where it's like, I hate it. It's the worst thing. I can have anxiety praying over an empty, open, blank email, trying to write back to somebody who's asking me some questions about stuff, versus like, I can just dictate into my phone, like, okay, write an email, responding, talking about this, this, and this. And then I'll get that back. Great. And so that's the question I keep asking myself, of how do I use this to help with organizing my receipts for my taxes, or organizing this for that, or coming up with a way to organize my workshop is a project I'm working on right now. It's like that sort of thing I'm trying to play with now to see if that's possible. Like one weird experiment I did the other day is, so I'm redoing our mudroom and like my office. I'm building a new office actually in another part of the house. And what I wanted to do is like, I want to have a design aesthetic that looks like a combination of Casey Neistat's studio mixed with like a farm, like barn. And so I asked ChatGPT, design a room that looks like this. And I basically gave it that prompt. It spit back 2 paragraphs that were great. I then actually asked it to strip out all the words and just use nouns and adjectives and separate those with commas. And then it gave me like, about 20 words. I copied that and pasted it into Midjourney, which again is this image generation software. Midjourney came back and gave me 4 or 5 different sketches and designs. That was like, holy crap, that's what I want. And so if you think about like just like interior design activity, right? Like that was just me messing around trying to solve this problem that, I wasn't finding stuff on Pinterest that I liked. And it's like, boom, it gave me exactly what I was looking for. And it was a combination of 2 AI tools that helped design what my new office is going to ultimately look like. Like it's that sort of stuff that I see as like the real like magic.
That's cool. Now take all those nouns and verbs and or adjectives and throw them back into Pinterest and see what comes up.
well, that's exactly it. And I think that it's like almost like, Google Translate, right? Where it's like you write something and then you translate it into Russian and then you translate it back into English and it doesn't look like what your English looks like. I've been finding that playing with these different tools with each other like is kind of a fun, interesting experiment, because you create these like connections that you would have never mentally created, but the computers are doing it for you. But then that might trigger a thought or an idea for you to say, oh, wow, this is what I should do.
Sorry, that was a funny one from Evan. I want to see AI response to SOE shotgun card order status email.
Yeah, that'd be good, Evan. That'd be good.
In the voice of John Willis, please. Yeah. Well, so we didn't go down the paranoid track I thought we would. I was thinking we would get some more in the chat.
I was expecting you guys to be skeptics, but you're kind of like, yeah, no, that makes sense. All right.
As I said, I played with it for 3 weeks because I didn't want to come in and be like, I'm going to make up why I hate it, having not actually touched the thing, because that's ridiculous. That's not how you make a good interview. I know that I don't like the content I get back from it until I edit it. But that's not necessarily, that just means it's not perfect yet, but that's not a surprise. That would be filed under unrealistic expectations.
I'm always fast to say, we're not doing that shit. But then as I think on it, and it could be 5 minutes or even 5 days, I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. I just don't do a lot of text. I'm actually very brief and factual and to the point. So most of my content is, in front of a live video. I do a live video every night. We do live videos on YouTube. We just don't put a whole lot of text to it. So in the beginning, you know, I'm like, okay, how do we use this thing? But I mean, I do see benefits to this, and I do see it. You can fight it and be scared of it, or you can join it and figure out, like Bitcoin, right? If you'd have done Bitcoin at the beginning, how much Bitcoin would you have right now as opposed to buying Bitcoin two years ago? So you can be fearful of it, but I'm of the belief that whatever we can imagine, it's a decade beyond. They're beyond where we can even fathom at this point.
Well, all right, John, I'm going to challenge you too, because I think you're focusing on the text part too much versus the information synthesis and idea generation capability that can have. So here, we're going to generate some show topics for a live stream for you, okay? Give me 3 things that you generally would like to talk about.
We're gonna talk about conspiracy theories. We're going to talk about why ducks are smarter than chickens, and we're going to talk about don't live in fear, instead focus on positivity instead of negativity.
Okay. All right. Now here we're going to go with the ducks and chickens. And what I'm going to say is generate a dozen show concepts for a live stream about why ducks are better than chickens. Write it in the style of Mr. Beast. Include titles and thumbnail descriptions as well as an outline. And I'm going to leave that typo in here and let's see what we get. Oh, hold on a second. I have to re-authenticate.
Yeah. Refresh. And it is a free thing, so sometimes it's
so this thing. Is the one thing. All right, so at 2:00 in the afternoon is not a great time to do this, but let's see if I can get it going.
Yeah.
There it goes.
There you go.
See, it gives you this like, hey, we're scaling, high demand. Sorry, guys.
Is there one we can just pay for?
Not yet, actually, surprisingly. They're doing this, I think, as like both a marketing scheme, because it's now taken over internet discourse, as well as a way to have like user testing, and basically go. So here we go. As you can see, it's starting to go, where it's giving you some title ideas and some concepts of what you could do in the live stream. I think it misunderstood my Mr. Beast reference a little bit, but I think like using it as a brainstorming tool and an outlining one is really where I see it. So, all right, I like this. The excellent experiment, the scientific experiment of egg laying capabilities. Write an outline for a video about an egg taste test between ducks and chickens. Bullet points for the various segments in the video. So, and these are weird ones because I think that like this is the other fun thing. Take things that are really not naturally put together and mash them up, and you get just weird stuff that comes back.
Oops.
Uh-oh. It's slow.
It's a little slow, but not bad. I mean, like, it's writing faster than I do. Can you read some of these out loud just for the audio
So introduction. Mr. Beast explains the purpose of the video, which is to conduct a taste test to determine duck eggs or chicken eggs are better. He introduces the panel of judges who will participate in the taste test. The egg collection. Mr. Beast shows the process of collecting eggs from both ducks and chickens, highlighting any differences in the process. The egg preparation. Mr. Beast shows the process of preparing the eggs for taste tests, including cracking and frying them, and he explains any differences in the texture and taste of the raw egg. The taste test. The panel of judges taste the duck eggs and chicken eggs, giving their thoughts on the flavor, texture, and overall taste of each egg. They also give their final verdict on which egg they prefer. The nutrition comparison. Mr. Beast compares the nutritional content of duck eggs and chicken eggs, highlighting the differences. And then conclusion. Mr. Beast summarizes the results of the taste test and the nutrition comparison and gives his own thoughts on which egg is better. And so it's like, there you go. That's a video outline if I've ever seen one. And so, you know, we're just doing this on the fly here. I think if you sat down with this and tried to outline a topic for a discussion for a live stream one night, you could find a way to like use this as a way to refine your thoughts pretty quickly, because that was less than 5 minutes of, okay, we got a video outline here.
Yeah. So we have to add random panic prepper ones in there. So there's going to be guineas. That's all I know.
Yeah, completely.
It's cool.
So yeah, so that's just, you know, I mean, this is where the thing I would try to say to everybody, if they want to hear anything from this, and I think this was my point a couple weeks ago, I'm not here to say I think this is going to end world hunger or, you know, save the seals or anything like that. What I see this as is things have made a pretty big leap in the last couple of months. I think people should be exploring it, testing it out, seeing how they can use it, and learning about it, because I worry for folks where it's going to be like another one of those revolutionary turns where, you know, a year from now, people who aren't here exploring this stuff, they're going to be completely befuddled by where things went. And I think they're going to miss out on some opportunities. That's why I see the advantage of it. And so right now, it's just, I think, a time to play.
Shop at Walmart all you want, but Walmart's still going to be there. That's for sure. You can utilize it or wait till you have no other choice.
True story. Yeah, well, and I think it's kind of like, let's think about another time when things have been sort of like this, where technology starts taking a jump forward, and if you don't go along with it, you end up in a weird place. And I think back to my grandma, who lived to be 94 or 95 or 96, somewhere in that range. I should totally know the answer to that, but I don't. She went to high school in the late 30s, early 40s. And in high school, they had typing class. And she did not take typing class, but her sister did. And so fast forward to the 90s and to early 2000s, her sister, who is 2 or 3 years younger than she, was writing email back and forth to the family. My grandmother was not, because she, quote unquote, could not use a computer because she never took typing class. And so the technological leap she missed was how to go from text on our keyboards to the computer. Now, how many of us actually have taken a typing class at this point, but we can type? Yeah, John took one. I never took one. I can type really fast. I played Mario Teaches Typing.
Yeah, no, never took one. And just, yeah, I've been using a keyboard since I was a kid. And that's really all it kind of comes down to. And so it's sort of the fluency with the tool comes from experimentation with the tool. And I think this is where, and I don't think people encourage this enough, where just play around. Like literally that, I think, is what actually creates that, you know, exposure in a way that's different. I think about like when I was a teenager and the internet starts to come in, and like it's like, oh wow, that's a whole, because I feel like that was another one of those revolutionary leaps where you had connected computers. That's totally different than what it was. I think, you know, mobile internet becomes another one where it's like now you have the internet in your pocket, and the amount of possibilities that get opened up by that, and like a smartphone, like that was another one. And so these shifts have happened. I just think it's, you know, it's interesting to see those earliest days when people, you know, look at the iPhone and say, wow, that's stupid. It doesn't have any buttons. Meanwhile, nobody cares about that, and nobody's phone has buttons anymore. It's like, that's, you know, how things evolve, and people will be skeptical at first because they're used to that. Hey, this is what things are like now, or this is what a stupid chat bot looks like on, you know, a customer service of a website type of thing, and let that be the perception of here's what AI is versus, you know, no, things are really shifting quickly right now, and I think it's a space to pay attention to.
at the point right now where guys are like, I'm not using social media. None of us would be talking. You're on YouTube. That's social media. You might not realize it. And do you even have to be able to text and type anymore, because you can just voice to text now? Like it's just leaps and bounds.
Yep.
Yeah, my other fluent typo reading is words that sound like other words that make sense within the context of the sentence that was dictated to the phone. It's a superpower. But yeah, we learn these things and we get more forgiving. And I mean, and then go back to John's thing with cryptocurrency, like with Bitcoin, we're not over the hump of where that's going to take us yet, but we are right on the cusp of it. And it's starting to become so easy to use that normal people are using. I'm going to normal, quote unquote, normal people are using it. The fact that any of us have learned how to interact with that in advance, it just works to our advantage. So we're not scared of it when it happens. Because the other big fear factor I see is the centralized digital currency running every aspect of your life. Well, it doesn't have to. If one comes in and the terms to use it are running are like transparency into every transaction you do, and you understand an alternative way of doing transactions, then it's powerless. It's just the ones, okay, you can see those ones and you can't see these ones. That's why I think we need to learn.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing too, and I think a lot about this one is, so much of what we've talked about, the value on it right now, is in like kind of a virtual, non-physical space. And so what I wonder about is when you start to mash up capabilities like what I just showed in like ChatGPT with, robotics or things like that. And is there a way to make an impact on the farm? I forget if this was before the stream or after the stream started, where labor is hard for me up here and like hiring is hard for me up here. Does that become the factor I need to scale my farming operation more? Because there's now resources that are coming that, while they're not as good as a person, they're going to help me be able to do as much work as I need to do. It's like that sort of thing. Like I wonder about that. And that's 10, 15 years out probably, but it's probably in my lifetime too. So it kind of shows what can become longer term.
Yeah, I think about the most annoying part of Homesteader farm automation is getting all the devices to work together to program the thing to do what you want it to do, whether it be raising your chicken door and then lowering it, which that's actually been simplified in recent years. But when I was trying to do that 10 years ago, it was hard. Where if I could tell a Assista or an AI, program the following 3 things to work together on the following schedule, etc., and give it parameters, which I think you can already sort of do. That would make it a lot easier from a standpoint of if I'm not a coder, I don't have to really understand how the code works. It's just like on Bitcoin, the Lightning Network has come in, right? You don't really need to understand how Bitcoin works to use the Lightning Network and to do financial transactions that are small at a fraction of the cost of paying for something with your credit card or with PayPal. So now it's like Bitcoin becomes TCP/IP, like the internet is TCP/IP, right? That's what Bitcoin becomes. And I feel like that is going to happen for that connection between coding and devices and smoothing that transition, where that's right now requiring a person with a brain.
Yeah. Well, and also a lot of farm automation stuff, right? Right now, the big flaw is it requires everything to be perfectly uniform. Like, oh, this thing can weed your garden if every plant is planted within 6 inches of the other plant. And it's just completely impractical for most operations unless you're like growing food in a warehouse. But I think as you start to add certain levels of intelligence to it where it can recognize, okay, this is a carrot and this is a weed, and now I can go through and pick out the weeds but keep the carrots, that then becomes useful, because I think the biggest struggle so far with farm automation is you need to be uniform, and nobody's farm or homestead is uniform, like full stop.
Like a farm bot, but with the plant identification app built in.
Right.
Yeah, and
on a XY axis, so I've seen them torch and plant and drill and do all kinds of stuff once you have your framework in place. But I mean, now they've got, we've got edgers and mowers that'll literally bush hog that are, on GPS, and they just deploy like a self-cleaning vacuum.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's go once around the horn. Like, sum up today what you think is most important for people to walk away with, and I'm going to go back around so you can promote your stuff. John, let's start with you.
I think it's cool. I don't think I even have grasped, the potentials of it. So, we'll look further into it. Had he not shown up on the live feed, I wasn't really even sure it was you, Morgan. When you showed up there, I'm like, I don't know if that's really him or not, because I'd never seen you on there before. So I'm glad that you did, man, and I will definitely pursue it.
Yeah, and I guess I think the thing I would say is play around. Like, don't be afraid. This is different than even what you saw like a year ago. Play around with it, explore. It can have some benefits, but it's not perfect. But I think things are coming.
Yeah, I don't have much different to say than what Morgan said. New technology feels scary when we first get into it. And yet, a lot of why we have the prosperity we have in our society is technological advance. And every time we have these big leaps, there is a subset that freaks out about it and gets left behind. And that's sad. And there's no reason to be left behind, I think. At the same time, I think it's important with any technological leap to evaluate how that works within the context of the life you want to live and not let it take over, because really the danger is when you let things like this device right here is terrible. Like you could look at this device all day and not get anything done. And that would be an abuse of this device, wherein if I use it as a tool that makes my life better, like being able to live stream to you from California, then that's good because I'm still able to do my job while being here for some other reasons. And that ends up being empowering rather than deflating. So always walking that balance, I think, is important. Okay, guys, Morgan, tell us, how can people like follow what you're doing? You have a pretty rad YouTube channel and you're sharing information, all of that. How can people like catch up with what you're doing?
Sure. So yeah, we're on kind of all the major social media platforms. Just look for Goldshaw Farm. On YouTube, yeah, we're putting out about 3 long videos a week and then a bunch of shorts. TikTok, we do multiple videos a day. Instagram, Facebook, we do a couple a week. So it's really just stories about stuff that's happening here on our farm, whether it's about the animals, the farm business, just stuff that's on my mind. A lot of that shows up in our content.
John, what do you got for us this week?
I do a live feed every night at 9:00. We can talk about whatever you want. We're doing 3 to 5 videos every day go up on YouTube. We've got a couple podcasts, and then we've got the members only question and answer stuff. Easy to find. I'm on every platform. If you want to interact, join on. If you like what I'm saying, I promise eventually I'll say something you don't like. If you don't like most of what I say, stick around. I'll say something you do like.
That's great. And I've got a podcast. It's called Living Free in Tennessee, audio podcast, but I also usually record live on YouTube at the Living Free in Tennessee channel. And we are all in on Self-Reliance Festival right now. We've got some great speakers lined up. If you want to learn more about that, head over to selfreliancefestival.com. I'm going to start doing the 7 p.m. Self-Reliance Festival live streams every night, starting this Thursday through the festival, so that we can just keep you updated on what's coming, because between now and the next probably 3 weeks from now, we add lots of speakers and demos. It's a great place to come learn basic skills, get to know other people who are interested in prepping, homesteading, self-reliance, building a more resilient lifestyle, making yourself better. These are the kind of people you want to hang out with. They're doers, not vampires, because I am anti-vampire, and so is John. He's more anti-vampire than I am. And I think having that community around you is super important. This one's going to be a great one. As the content's been coming together, I'm to the point where I'm beyond excited, and you'll start seeing me exploding on these live streams about what's coming. So that's going to be on my YouTube channel, on the Self-Reliance Festival channel. I don't know if it'll be on John's yet till after this, but he'll tell me if I can live stream there or not for the 7 p.m. on Thursday ones. All right, guys.
And the Telegram for Self-Reliance is off the hook.
Yeah, there is a Telegram group. They all help each other out. It's pretty cool.
It's funny you guys should say Telegram, because I just started getting on Telegram lately. I've been working on this video where, and you guys probably see this too, where it's like you get these scammers in your comments, like, from WhatsApp or Telegram saying, oh, message me here, and they pretend to be you. Well, I got a burner phone, and I've been like trying to communicate with everybody who does that. And I've been making a video just documenting that whole experience. And it's been fascinating, the stuff you're seeing when you start talking to these people who are pretending to be me, which is like amazing.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Man, I'm going to go find those. I want to watch that. I haven't seen that. Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for being on today.
Thanks, guys.